Seeker and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and on remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? A place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the Truth Seeker podcast.
Oracles, psychics, everything's ungodly. Dark savage.
Streaming live at truthseeker.com.
She's not a Christian.
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tapered in down stuff.
And now, your host, Truth Seeker.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, Truth Seeker. This is the Truth Seeker podcast, and I'm excited and delighted to be with you guys today here live on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on the podcast and wherever you are, just thank you for being with us. So we got an awesome show planned for you guys today. Always talking about our life purpose, our life goal, finding our mission, finding a calling, these type of things. I love to talk to people who have found this, and people who have something to bring to the table to teach you how to find your own life goal and life purpose. And so I think all of this kind of plays a role in us being where we're supposed to be on our journey, and being able to learn from everybody and whatever's working for them. How did they do it? And people who have techniques to help you and teach you how to find your life goal yourself. So that's what it's about. This is a tangible podcast. This is some information that we have that you can apply to your life. So always good stuff. I want to start off by saying a quick thank you to all the patron supporters, everybody supporting over at patreon.com/Truth Seeker. Everybody supporting there month to month. Thank you so much for helping me get this show out to the masses. And so without you, I would not be able to do this. So quick shout out to some of the latest patrons we have within this last week. Two people here, Miguel Carmona and Sophia. Thank you guys for joining with us on Patreon and supporting the work. If you'd like to do that, head on over to patreon.com/Truth Seeker. There you get access to my entire discography, my life's work essentially, with music. And so you get 10 plus albums available to download, a bunch of exclusive music there. You also get access to extra podcasts and interviews and things like that. Thursday nights, we do something called the School of the Mystics, and you get access to that as well. That's the community side of the podcast. So if you would like to be a part of that and join in with us on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Central, head on over to patreon.com and sign up for any level of giving. And if you like what you're hearing and you want to help bring this to the masses, man, get over there and support. Thank you guys for everything. So my guest today, Daniel Goodenough. Daniel, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
First question, is that your real last name?
It is. It's a family name.
It fits. It fits. You are good enough.
Apparently started in the Isle of Wight. So,
awesome. Wow, it just fits perfectly. Having that spoken over you every time your name was called in school. Good enough. Yes, I am good. No feeling of being unworthy or an underachiever, right?
Well, actually, it did keep me present to that question. And I wouldn't say immediately assumed I was. So yeah, that's part of the process of growing up and saying, yeah, am I?
That's something that you bring to the table too, and I've been hearing from some people, and that's a whole nother way of approaching it. A lot of people talking about they knew what they were supposed to do from a young age since they were born. I don't know if it's always feeling like you had a calling or a life purpose, or you were sitting here to do something, essentially. Some people walk around aimlessly, and they're still trying to find that on into their adult life. They don't know why they're here, but you had that feeling since you were a child. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It is true that as long as I can remembering, I don't know what point that is when you're aware that you're aware, I did know why I was here. And then the question was, looking around as a young child, at all the people that I could see going off to these jobs that were making them miserable, and really wondering why it was they were doing that. So that was part of my life pursuit, was helping other people get in touch with who are you? Why are you here? And what does that call you to do? The why translated as a what that calls me to do would be the outer life mission, and the who that calls me to become, and who will I become by doing it, is the inner life mission. And what I would say about that is, well, I did know early on, one of the things I'm sharing is that it's not just for the lucky few. That it's a skill development like anything else in life. And if you're willing to do the practices, if you were an elite athlete, there'd be practices to do every day. If you wanted to be an elite musician, there'd be scales to do every day. So I bring what you might say are life mission scales. There are practices you can do. So my promise is that anyone and everyone can get in touch, if you're willing to do the practices, with why you're here, what that calls you to do, and who that's calling you to be. And like Pablo Casal's doing his scales in his 90s, it's not a one-time thing, because how you express, or the vehicle you use to express it, is probably changing rapidly in our world. That the average graduating high school student today can expect to have as many as 16 different careers in their lifetime. So how are you going to decide how you're moving through the multiple careers in a way that, let's say, lights you up?
Yeah. And essentially which ones come first, which ones you should pursue. There's this notion that I've been exploring a little bit here, and finally starting to see some success with my life. I was a truck driver for the past 15 years, and eventually felt like that truck was a cage. I would drive 700, 800 miles per day, and I just felt like I was stuck, and I was supposed to be doing something greater, that life purpose that we're talking about, that you felt when you was a kid. I felt that as well. And I have my hand in a lot of different things, being real creative. I like the podcast. I like to do music. I like to do spoken word. I like to do gaming, a whole bunch of stuff that I'm good at, all of it. But it's about finding which one you should spend the most time in for that season, why you should do it, and what I found that ended up being the key is we can explore any of that and go down any of it and be successful doing any of it, but it's picking one or two and just being consistent with it. Consistency became my my hashtag, essentially, because it was definitely my problem, and a lot of other people who are creative and they have all of these creative ideas. I can do this. I can start a nonprofit. I can start an MLM. I can join this company. I can go work for this friend. All of these things are possible. We could do all of it. And I've seen myself and many of my friends get into something for a week, get into something for 2 weeks, get into something for a month, and they're excited. They're in it. But every week they're jumping to something different. Talk a little bit about how we're supposed to pick what we're to do, if any, and how consistency pays off in doing that.
Well, I one of the ways to approach that is, again, skill development. And the consistency you're talking about is being consistent in the conversation that you're having with the one that sent you. So that I mean, if you say life mission, it implies, by the way you're saying that, you were sent. And that's one of the reasons I say mission instead of purpose, because purpose is often temporary. You know, like sometimes our purpose is to get to the other side of the room, or sometimes our purpose is to finish our work early so we can enjoy a long weekend. May or may not have anything to do with why you're here unless you make that your purpose. So mission, implying being sent, means it's a conversation you're having with the one that sent you, whatever that means to you. And so then if you are consistent in your conversation with life, with the one that sent you about why am I here, then it means there's an ongoing inquiry. And that inquiry can be skillful. And the inquiry can be, let's say, from a dropped-in place, a meditative place, you know, however you do that in your practice, that says, I'm not going to try to figure out what I'm going to do next. And if you're in the consistent inquiry, like some of the things that you mentioned, if you were going to do that masterfully, you'd be present to, how is it working out what I'm doing? Let's say it is something that you have an interest in and a passion around, and you start doing it. The ongoing inquiry with why am I here and what does that call me to do and who does that calling me to be could be the ongoing inquiry with, how's it working? You know, the what I'm doing and the who I'm showing, you know, could I refine who I'm showing up as? Could I refine my idea of who I'm going to be as a result of doing that? And does that sync with my impression of why I'm here? And there are scales to do. And if you want to be not just masterful at identifying the what, but masterful with the ongoing process of how you're showing up to that, then from time to time, which vehicle you are expressing through wouldn't be something you figured out, or wouldn't be something in the spur of the moment, through a moment of enthusiasm you decided to jump on. It'd be coming from an informed, let's say, realization that resulted from an ongoing practice of showing up to the inquiry consistently. So that consistency you're mentioning, that's around being masterful at anything, many of the things you're doing, like becoming more masterful at doing this podcast, would be the same kind of consistency required to not only know the why, what, and who, but knowing how you're being called to show up to that in the way that it might be morphing and transforming and evolving.
Understanding the way the mind works, and if we know how to be consistent, maybe you've explored the opposite end of the spectrum of what is it that makes people not be consistent. Why do people abandon something? And here's a word, self-sabotage. There's many people who get started. I think I've been there. I don't know if it's just a lack of support, or when success starts to come, jump ship and abandon it and start something brand new. A lot of my friends, a lot of these people, it's some type of mechanism, some type of trigger. I don't know what would cause it. Have you studied that at all? That when people are consistent, things start to flourish for them, they get scared and run and abandon ship. I think part of it, for me, has been wanting to be original, wanting to brand something and birth it that was new. And then when other people start copying it, I'm like, okay, you guys can have it. Let me do something else. I've been a part of that. Have you studied a little bit of that at all?
Sure. I guess you could talk about that as foundation. So why, some of the reasons that people sabotage themselves could be comfort zone, shadow, resistance, compensatory self, all those kind of fundamental personality things or deep self things. So sure, it helps you stay present to the conversation if you're having a conversation about shadow as the denied parts of self, what I'm not present to that is present in how I'm showing up in the world, and how my compensatory, the selves I created to be okay with who I was in the environment of growing up. Anytime I wasn't okay as who I was, I created a compensatory self as an adjustment to that. There's that. You could say that what's comfortable for us, there is a thing called a positive comfort zone. If you're present to the comfort zone that stops you, you might be present to how do I expand by trying new things, a broader range of what I'm comfortable in developing skill in. So there are all of those things. And coming back to the life mission, I would say, when you were talking about feeling like that truck was a cage, in my experience in life personally, I found that when I would be between things, and that would feel like I was doing a day job that I could say that I'm stuck in, having a clear idea that I was in the process of moving toward the next phase of my life mission had me being in that day job and not feeling stuck in it, because the ever-present day-to-day humdrum or boredom or angst about being in this dead-end day job, that, or at least I perceived it to be, was mitigated by the fact that I knew I was in the process of moving to the next step in my life mission. And I had an ongoing process of being in that dialogue. Like some of those skills are, speaking of the early life things, when I looked at my childhood and it said, and looking back and I'd say, what were my favorite toys? What were my favorite stories? What were my favorite movies? What sports? What places did I like to go to? What activities? And then I said, why? Why were those my favorites? What in those stories or movies or the things I did with the toys or sports that I was involved in, what was it about those that speaks to my nature? Who were my heroes and why were they my heroes? And if I said I could spend a day with anyone, who would it be and why would I choose that? Or if I could go to any place in history, where would I go to spend a day or week or a month? And why would I say that? That's just one of many hundreds of scales that if I'm asking myself on a consistent basis, and it's an ongoing practice that helps me to be masterful with my why, what, and who, then the moment-to-moment decision about which of my quote-unquote passions I'm going to pursue right now wouldn't be a figuring it out thing. It would be, let's say, intuitively obvious because I've been in this conversation with myself, let's say capital S, and the one that transcends my compensatory comfort zone shadow self, and the one that sent me, and life. Because none of us exist on an island. Well, most of us do not live on an island by ourselves. So it's that conversation with the one that sent us, with what we're surrounded, our environment, and the aspects of the inner self.
With that, that's good you brought that up, because with that there's this, and I mean I would do that. I would fill the cage, and then I would have to check myself and say, look, you prayed for this job. You asked for a better job. This job is better than the one you were at before this. And you have to bring yourself back in the moment and understand. But especially when you're on the brink and you're on the edge and you can see it, it's so close, but yet so far away, that angst that gets there. And essentially you're you're starting to curse a blessing that God sent you, that you asked for, and there's other people. What helps you be present and thankful is there's other people who would kill for your job right now, who would kill to be in that cage in that truck. But it's that inward desire that you're put here for more. And here's another thing, I guess another part of it is that even in the scriptures, it talks about how we're supposed to be it talks about how we're supposed to be present and content. So how do we reach a level of contentment wherever we are, but still want more for our life? Because in religion, there's what's called the prosperity gospel, and that's like you never have enough. You just want more and more and more and more, and you're never satisfied. Once you get that job, you want the better job. Once you get that car, you want the better car. You got to keep up with the Joneses. And there's that notion that's there. But as far as like being content where you are and not being anxious, not worrying, but still wanting something better, where's that safe zone there?
Well, I think that starts with the why question. I'm saying, why am I here? What's that called me to do? And who's that called me to be? If I'm present to the why, then I'm asking, what's it for? So when you get the thing you said you wanted, and you're having this ongoing conversation about the why, which means the what I acquired, what does that have to do with the why I said I'm here? And it wouldn't be wrong to say, for instance, I want this beautiful car, or I want this beautiful house, or I want this fill in the blank, whatever it is. It's not that it's wrong per se. You might ask yourself, though, that now that I have it, or if I got that, would that actually make me happy from the perspective of why I'm here? So if you're present to the service aspect of why you're here, and you could ask yourself, what's it for? So then if you're in the middle of the situation that you're in angst about, like you said, maybe you got something that you prayed for, and then it was not all you expected it to be, or now you're anxious for what's next. You could ask yourself, well, in terms of what my life is for, having gotten this, what is that telling me? You know, the part of me that wants to be anxious about the next, let's say, shiny object.
Yeah.
Is it a shiny object, or is it the next piece of why I said I'm here? If it's why I said I'm here, and I trust that I am in this conversation with the one that sent me, then I won't be in such a hurry to figure from my local perspective whether or not I should be further along or not. And I might trust that it is in process. And if I'm in the ongoing inquiry, I won't be anxious so much about the process because I'm in that ongoing inquiry and the conversation with the one that sent me in life.
Okay, that I want to ask you a little bit about that term there. The one that sent me. I talk about God, spirituality, all of these things. Very comfortable with that. Is that the beginning prerequisite to finding your dream? Is that like, because I know if you have these steps, like people who don't believe or people who have who have problems with those type of terms of God, of a higher power, whatever the case is, do you have to come to kind of grips with that first with your approach of finding out why they're here? If they don't, are they working against it? How does that work for someone who may not believe?
Well, it's not a prerequisite to start. Like, so sometimes I might say life. You know, you're in a conversation with life. And the thing is, if you start that conversation and you stay in that conversation, it's pretty much inevitable that you will arrive at a point where you get to, okay, so then what's creating this life you're in conversation with? Like, so you can be atheist or agnostic, and you could start the journey, and you could call it just life, divine intelligence, whatever word you pick. And if you stay in the conversation, at some point, it's going to light up for you that there is a something and a someone, or, you know, I guess we could say first person, second person, third person view of God. You know, there's God, the it, you know, like Star Wars, the Force. There's God, second person, you know, like a personification of that, or there's God in first person. You know, so any way you shake it, at some point, if you just stay in the conversation, that will emerge for you. So I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite to start. If you start, though, you will arrive at that frontier at some point, and then you'll have to get present to, you know, what is it I'm in conversation with that isn't this vague notion that I'm calling life? And life would be okay to start. Fair. You could be agnostic, and you could be, I haven't decided yet, but start the journey, be in inquiry with life. And, you know, and the other thing is, again, if I say it's life mission, that implies being sent. You know, we're either talking spiritual or military. Mm-hmm. You know, so again, that's why I don't say purpose, because purpose could be what you decide in the moment. And one of the things I've noticed about purpose is it tends to run in trends, like fashion trends in clothing. You know, like in any given, let's say, decade, it might be fashionable to decide that this is my purpose. But when I say mission, it implies that it was packed in your bags when you were sent. You know, like if you're sending your child to music camp, you might pack sheet music and instruments along with the clothes. If you're sending your child to sports camp, you'd pack athletic equipment. You know, so we came already packed in our bags, as embedded in our members, as it says in the scriptures, so that it's embedded in your members. It's written in your members. So it's not something you decide in the moment. It's more like you remember.
That's what some people in the chat are asking about the act of remembering. It's something they were sent. Did we know it when we were children? Did we forget it? Are we trying to find it out? What is it? The whole term, the act of remembering for you, because I know that's a key word for you.
So remembering is, the word means to make part of you. Remember, make it part of you again. And the research shows that when you ask somebody in life at the point where they're free to do whatever they want to do, maybe they won the lottery, maybe they're retiring and they're in a good place in the retirement, or for whatever reason got an inheritance, what the research says inevitably they arrive at what they want to do then is what they already knew at 7 they wanted to do. And there's things about how the brain forms that make sense of the 7 thing. And from a spiritual perspective, you could say you've been here long enough to kind of see how it works here, but not so long you forgot where you came from. All those things that around the 7-year-old says that most of us knew at 7, unless we had, let's say, trauma. If we were the victim of some trauma, maybe we buried it. But most kids do know at 7. And then they get talked out of it because it's not a thing in our culture to make that a priority, unfortunately. And I'd like to change that. So then it means, well, then how do you remember? And again, what I'm saying is there is a process. I've spent my life putting it together, and I'm not the only one that's developed a process for remembering. The ongoing inquiry, the ongoing doing of the scales, like anything you want to become masterful with, can bring you through here's what I've noticed about my life, and I'm going deeper in the inquiry. And if you stay in that inquiry, it's my promise that you will remember, and you will be able to say to anyone anywhere under any circumstance, and articulate it fully. Here's why I'm here. This is what I'm called to do at the moment, and this is who I'm called to be to step into next. And I do have a sense of who I'll become in a general way. And then I'm in the ongoing inquiry about being able to dance with that, so that if the next I'm present to changes, I'll be ahead of that and working on it before it shows up, because I'm masterful at embodying my reason for being here. And I have made part of me again, that thing that I came to express. And that is the word remembering, to reconnect some part of you, which was the thing you came with and for.
Okay, so you said the word to be able to dance with it. That's a great word, because I think the journey is the dance, and actually going to recapture the dream, or to remember the dream, as you're saying. Some people in the chat also, this is Hunter, he's asking about, okay, so what if you know your mission? And I guess that's debatable, though. Okay, we'll just say this. If you know your mission, and you're trying, but nothing is paying off, there's no fruit, you're not gaining any ground, whether you want to be a successful musician, nobody wants to give you a shot, nobody acknowledges you, nobody recognizes that you're trying, it feels like you're spinning your wheels in the mud. What do you do if you feel like that's your life mission and it's not working? Do you need to go back and reevaluate it, to go back into what we call the secret place of meditation and prayer, and get further instructions on how to do it and what to do? Could somebody be jumping the gun on their life mission and spinning their wheels, or being successful in the wrong direction?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways I talk about is the difference between trans-rational. We start off in life, we're pre-rational. Then our Western culture has been pretty good, at least in certain places in the world, in training people to be skillful with the rational mind. What we haven't engaged in so much is the trans-rational knowing self, that in our moments of epiphany, that's the trans-rational self. Like epiphany means eternity has entered into time. So one of the problems of the 400 years of the view of the world as a machine or a clock like mechanism, if I just understand how the cogs work, I'll understand the purpose of the watch or the machine. So how that comes back to the question you were presenting is, let's say that you have a pretty good idea of the larger why you're here, that you have an impression that the what, how I'm going to express that is, let's say, being a musician. Then how you're going to express that, how you're meant to step into that, the how part, becomes more skillful if you're in the conversation with life. So being like again, coming back to the elite athlete. If you're an elite athlete, of course, you know you want to win the match or the game. At the level of an elite athlete, when you become a pro, which is what you'd want to be, if you said music was my mission, I want to be a pro. I want to be able to make a living doing this. Then part of the ongoing process is understanding all the people you're in that field with and what the nature of today's environment for, in this case, music is. So the ongoing skill development of both being a musician and being masterful at expressing your mission would be, again, coming back to the scales, there'd be musical scales to do, and there'd be professional awareness scales to do, meaning here's the business of music, and then I want to be an accomplished musician. The aspect of how to manifest that in terms of an expression of your mission would be doing the life mission scales. So that inquiry, the ongoing inquiry, like what is fascinating me now? What am I noticing I'm noticing now? And why am I noticing that? And what does that have to do with why I'm here? And in the conversation with the one that sent me, assuming that the one that sent you wants you to step into that, if that's why you're here, there's a guidance that comes not just from your, let's say, meditation and states of prayer. It's also what you might call the book of life. You know, so everything speaks. If you are present, if you adhere to the idea that you're in a conversation with the one that sent you, then that conversation shows up everywhere in your life. Mm-hmm. And if you fully expect to get that guidance for how do I move from where I am now to being a professional musician, you know, it's fair enough that there's frustration and angst about that. That won't do much for you if you now move from the angst to, okay, I'm going to let's say be present to that. There is a place in me that's present to the trans-rational conversation that I could be having with spirit or life, whatever you call that, the one that sent you. Then I'm now going to be present to the book of life, and that everything speaks, and that life, spirit, the one that sends me, wants me to get the message. Here's what you do next. Here's where you go. Here's who you talk to. This is what you research. There are steps to follow to manifest the how of your why, what, and who. And having that ongoing inquiry, you know, that the mystics say the two wings of waking up are your meditative, contemplative, prayerful practices and inquiry. So the ongoing practice of inquiry as to the why, what, and who is the foundation for the how do I step into it, so that you're not just trying to figure out one of the things we say about the figuring it out mind as a structure of mind is it will be based entirely on your experience. And if your experience was adequate, you'd be a professional musician. If you aren't or haven't been and you want to be, if you're not already, then your past experience isn't the thing that's going to get you there. So then there is, by definition, if you're figuring it out, the figuring it out mind is basing that on your experience of the past or other people's experience of the past. And at the rate of change in the world, what you need is the call of the future. Call it divine intent. And if you're in the conversation with the one that sent you, you will find the divine intent for how to step into the how. You'll get guidance, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that brings you back to the inquiry again. So again, you're back to the practice, the inquiry. What do I notice about what I notice? If people, it's like one of the things about, I'm good at this and I'm good at this and I'm good at this. And I've worked with so many people that, as you say, got to the top of the ladder, as Stephen Covey would say, and found out that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. So I've talked to so many people that were accomplished and successful at what they did, and they're going, yeah, I was good at it. And so I decided to do it, but it has absolutely nothing to do with why I'm here.
Yeah.
So the first thing is say, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's something that you need to step into.
Yeah.
It will be used. Everything's used.
Yeah.
So if you have a skill, it'll be used in what you're meant to step into. It doesn't mean that's the thing you're meant to step into.
So even though we go the wrong direction, even though we are in maybe a place of the wilderness, or we willingly do it, or we accidentally do it, in the end, you believe that it's used for your greater good. Those years that you went down this path of pursuing this thing that didn't pay off, and really, in the end, it looks totally different than what you're called to. There's something that we learn in that, right? There's something that we learn to value in that, whether it's people skills, whether it's a level of gratitude, or what not to do again. I think that's a big one. It's a lot of people like to overlook what not to do that led me down the wrong road. Like, I think that those things that we learn are priceless, because once you reach a certain level, you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to go down the wrong road. Once you've spent years building something, I feel like it's a testing thing, and I feel like it's mapped out, where we're talking about the creator or the one who sent you mapped out this life, even the mistakes, even the things that we have to learn from, that the only way we'll get it is to experience it and to do it, whether it took you 3 months or 3 years to go down or turn your back on your calling or whatever, to find out, like, hey, this is what I really want, and I'm going to pursue it, and I'm going to make sure that I do it. Because, like, the character traits that are imparted by going through these testings and stuff, you wouldn't want to have, like, this my experience, a platform like this, where there's a lot of people listening, hanging on to the words that you say. They take your words of advice. You wouldn't want to have a big platform like this and start giving out bad advice or stuff that's going to hurt people that years ago you thought was legit or you thought was the truth. I think that with bigger platforms comes a greater level of responsibility, and that those who are trusted with much, there's a lot riding on it. And so I'm thankful for going down those paths or whatever that almost seemed like dead ends at the time, but I've been able to hold on to something, to bring to where I am today, to learn what not to do, even as much as what to do.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is, you pointed out to holding on to a question of why and what, as if it's not an accident that I'm here and there's a something. So the point of that being that it's not just by default that if you go off path, it'll all be used for good. So one of the ways I talk about that is maybe the distinction between destiny and fate. Destiny, it has to do with why you're here, but it won't happen by default. It's a decision you make every day to show up to your destiny. And if you choose not to show up to your destiny, then you'll live fate. And sometimes it works out for people. The thing about fate, though, is like you're a cork on the river. And the river will take you where it takes you. And, for many people, being a cork on the river and just kind of going with the flows, quote unquote, works out pretty well for them until it doesn't. The thing about being a cork on the river is you might be enjoying the scenery, and then around the next bend of the river, you get caught up in a backwash, and your life is now just going around and around and it's going nowhere. And the thing about fate, where you make a choice about showing up to that question and that inquiry day by day, means that it's like you're not a cork on the river, you're in a boat and you've got some oars. And your intention and this thing we've been given called choice, it's like sometimes we only understand the gift of choice when we see what happens when we're not choosing. Mm-hmm. So, that, yes, if you show up every day to the question of why am I here? What does it call me to do? Who am I called to become? If I'm showing up to the question, I might be doing things that didn't take me where I thought they would go. I might make a quote unquote mistake. And if I still stay present, like you said, hold on to the question, I will get guided back. And in physics, there's this thing called the basin of attraction. There's this, and they also have a thing called the great attractor. So in the basin of attraction called forth by the great attractor, you could say that there's a magnetism and a pull, that comes both from the one that sent you in the conversation you're having with that great attractor and the magnetism of your life mission. And yes, you might go up the sides and a little bit off track, but if you hold your attention on your intention, the attention is the life force, the intention is the blueprint. If you bring your life force, the attention, to the intention to embody your reason for being here, you can go up the sides of that wall a few times, but you'll get called back to the center of that basin that's pulling you toward. Eventually, you will step into your why you're here. It's inevitable, but only if you choose to keep showing up to it. Yeah. It won't happen by default.
I think part of the choosing to step into it and taking whatever steps they are, using everything as a stepping stone for your destiny, which we learn from our mistakes. We have to learn from our mistakes if we're not going to repeat them, especially once you reach a certain level. If you're in the goal, you don't want to. If you've spent time self-sabotaging, like once you're in what you're supposed to be doing, you don't want to self-sabotage. If you learn what runs people off, you don't want to do that once you're in what you're trying to build or whatever your calling is. So one thing is about learning from your mistakes, but I also find this bigger picture is being able to learn from the mistakes of others, especially if we're trying to study an art. That's one thing. If it's an art, or if it's let's say a podcast, for instance, find out what other people are doing on the podcast, what's working for them to make them successful. See if it applies to you, if you can apply it to what you're doing, and see what's, why they aren't successful. Like a lot of times you can look at people and be able to tell that they have character flaws, and okay, they keep doing this. Once they reach a certain level of fame or notoriety, then they run everybody off, or they self-sabotage, and then they disappear for 6 months and they don't put out any music, or they don't put out any material or content. And that's a form of self-sabotage as well, of not creating something or bringing something to the table. You learn what you're supposed to do by watching the mistakes of others. And so I'm able to avoid a lot of pitfalls that I didn't have to experience firsthand. I got to see the fruit and what happens if you do that on a public level or on a personal level. If you indulge and whatever, and we can apply this to everything, but be able to look at somebody else's mistakes and learn from it and say, okay, let me write that down. Never do that, because this is what happens when I watch my friend, I watch my brother, I watch this other person. They all did it, and this was what happened to them.
If I could, I'd like to add a distinction to that.
Okay.
Notice earlier we were talking about people who reach the top of the ladder, find it's leaning against the wrong wall. They might become very successful at something, and it may have nothing to do with why they're here. So the distinction about learning from your mistakes for this conversation might be helpful, that there's the question of just becoming successful. And if you're learning from your mistakes, you might become very successful. If you've lost track of the conversation of why am I here and what's it for, what's it in service to, you might learn from your mistakes and become very successful at something that has nothing to do with why you're here. So for this conversation, I would say it would be important to say, if I'm learning from my mistakes, one of the questions is, was my mistake, I lost track of my why? That would be one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
The thing where somebody seems to be going entirely in the wrong direction and actually sabotaging everything they built might mean they lost track of why they were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, okay, if I'm going to learn from this mistake or this quote unquote failure, if I start with what has that got to do with why I'm here, then what you learn from your mistake will help you get closer to why you're here and stepping into it. So I just wanted to make the distinction that just learning from your mistakes doesn't necessarily take you towards your life mission unless you're in that inquiry. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because you can learn from your mistakes but you could be on the wrong path. I think if you just deviate
on the wrong path.
If you just deviate a little bit, if I think that there's this balance, and for me, it's even what the scripture talks about, the narrow road. I don't think it's too far left or too far right, but it's that balance in the middle of what you're supposed to be doing and not getting off any, but veering just a little bit. And you go and you walk down that path a couple miles, you're going to be off. You're going to be way off path once you veer, whether it's veering because of the opinions of men and what other people suggest you do, or other people's opinions of you, or whatever. It can throw you off your life path. And like I said, for me, it's about being consistent. And it's not I think the why is big, like you're talking about, because I've seen from firsthand experience, and where my purpose or whatever I'm building shifts because of others, because someone told me, no, you can't do it. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to prove to you that I can do anything I put my mind to. And I go about, taking those steps to do that. And it's not what you're supposed to be doing. And you're becoming successful with it. We talk about, the mind being so powerful that we can do anything that we put our mind to. That's why the scripture says to renew your mind daily. Make sure you have the right thoughts and the right intentions at heart. And so we can go down this path like we're talking for years and brand something, make business contracts and deals, and bring all these other people into something that I think deep down you weren't supposed to be in to begin with. It's successful. It may be something good, but deep down, that you're not supposed to be doing it. And therefore, there's a picture as well I like to see in the story of Jonah, how Jonah's kind of in this thing where he's running from God. He knows what he's supposed to be doing, but he's got his own thing that he wants to do. So he's in this tug of war with God of what he's doing. So he gets on this boat, and he's running from God, and the winds and the waves and the storms come because God's chastising him. God's chasing him. We don't want, he can't run from him. So these people on this boat are the boat's about to sink because this guy is on the boat. So this guy's actions are affecting everybody's life that is around him, and he's bringing all types of calamity on these people because he is running from God or running from that purpose, And so I think that's what a lot of times people do. We go down these roads and we think that we're okay, but we're finding out that it's not just us, that there's a lot of other people who are left in the wake of our mistakes of running from God or running from our purpose or trying to create a new purpose. I think a lot of people do it because they're scared of the purpose. They're scared of the mission or the vision. It's too big, and they seem too small, and it seems so far away. So I can't obtain that. So let me obtain a smaller version of it that seems obtainable. I think that's a big reason why people try to run from it.
Sure. And if you're aware that you're in the conversation with the one that sent you, and you actually have a conviction, let's say, or belief that that divine intent has your best interest in mind. And let's say that your local self, or self lowercase s, sees that as something scary, then you might ask yourself if the one that sent you has your best interest in mind, that it will unfold at the rate that you're capable of being present to it. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. And then there is this thing that it kind of speaks to what you were talking about in a more general way from Proverbs, the book of wisdom. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he will not depart from it. That is maybe not the best translation. That train comes from the Hebrew for midwifery, which means create an environment for life. It comes like right after the child is born, clearing the cowl in the mouth so the child can breathe. So if you let's say, were to have a more accurate translation of what the actual original Hebrew said, it would be not that the parent is supposed to tell the child what they're supposed to do and they won't depart from it. What it actually says is create an environment for life according to your child's gift or bent. And when he or she is older, he or she will not depart from it. So that's great advice for a parent. Create an environment for life for your child, which means, again, it isn't necessarily your job to understand your child or tell your child what they should do with your life. It might be more you help them find the mentors that are correct for them, that do understand them. In other words, create an environment for life. So that's great instruction for a parent, for a child. But what about if you're already an adult, you could say, this thing that you might go off and do in resistance to what you're called to do, or maybe you're kind of sort of doing it and kind of sort of not, but you're not sure. If you asked yourself the question, if you were parenting yourself and the object was to create an environment for life, are you experiencing this as creating do you feel alive in this? Are you creating life for other people in this? That's the first part of that. And the second part around the mission piece is, are you creating the environment for life within your gift or bent? Like, in other words, I was designed in a certain way, my gift or bent. I was designed with a certain predisposition. It's not an accident that I'm fascinated by what I'm fascinated by. I'm motivated by what I'm motivated by, that I seem to have these talents and gifts. That's not, if you say that's not an accident, that's your gift or bent, then how are you meant to create an environment for life with your gift or bent? So then, this thing where I'm all off doing something because, maybe my shadow resistance, comfort zone, fear, whatever has me resisting what my heart knows I'm being called to because it seems too big, or it seems like it's too much work, or whatever the resistance program might be. If you start with the question, is this an environment for life for me? Is this an environment for life for the world? Is this creating a better place for my having been here? Richard Bowles, in his What Color Is Your Parachute, talking about mission, said the 3 life missions: remember the one that sent you, make the world a better place for having been here, and do the thing you most love to do in the way you most love to do it with the people you'd most love to do it with, in the way the world most needs it done. So that would mean if you were doing all that, you'd be creating an environment for life for yourself and for the people around you, and you'd be doing that according to your gift or bent.
It's a lot different for us because that comes a lot later. It would be awesome if we were trained up in a way that we should go, and then when we're older, we have skills that we can, that were imparted to us and instilled in us to find our life's calling and life's purpose. What if as a child, you were trained up in an environment for life for you? And that's part of the discussion. Like, why is it that we wait till we're an adult to have these conversations? Mm-hmm. If we had these conversations ongoing, if it's true that we knew at 7, why wouldn't we stop talking our children out of it? Why wouldn't we train people up, create an environment for life according to their gift or bent? Yeah. So that wouldn't have to go through the forgetting and then remembering. Yeah. So you wouldn't have people going to college, spending anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 these days to get a degree in something I was never sure I wanted to do anyway. Like, wouldn't it make just fiscal sense
to have this conversation through secondary school, through grade school and secondary school, so that when you moved on, whether you moved into college or occupational training or just life, that whatever you decided to do, it would be from your gift or bent, and you'd be clear about it, and you know why, and you wouldn't be wasting $100,000 to $200,000 getting an education that was for nothing, having anything to do with why you're here. So as we're growing up, this conversation might even be more important.
It's about recapturing the dream, remembering the dream. If I look back at my childhood, I was definitely a class clown, one who loved to see people smile, loved to entertain people. I can look back and that's essentially what I'm doing. I love to entertain people. I love to see people smile and bring healing through laughter. You know what I'm saying? And all of those things. I knew, much like you, a piece of what I wanted to do, whether it was to be on stages in front of people, do music, all of these things. I loved it as a kid. And there's a lot of kids who are doing it and or who have felt that way. But when the world talks them out of it, or you have to, give it up, I could tell you, man, it's this weird hurt, essentially, to see people who are, even much older in life, who have given, 20, 30 years to a company, but they're almost just like living by default. Like they didn't choose that. They just like randomly got this job. But if they're okay with it, that's another story. You know what I'm saying? If they're okay with it, like if they feel like, if they don't have that inward cage, feeling like they're in a cage or they're trapped, or I wish I could have did this with life, or have these regrets, then I think it's okay. But I see so many people, I feel like they're living by default and they've given up on the dream. So
one thing I might say about that is it's never too early and it's never too late. I mean, it would be great to talk to children about why they're here. And so, I had a client who was in her 90s. She had been a dean of a nursing school, retired from being a dean of the nursing school. She's 90. So he's like, so you did this thing. It was very fulfilling. And now what? You're 90. Why you should just, I don't know, do embroidery and play golf or something? So we had the conversation, and she wound up then exploring her calling to be an author, and she started writing books.
Yeah.
So it's never too early and it's never too late. And then the other part of that is your life mission isn't necessarily a job. I've always said that you can find a way to make it a job. You can find a way to make a living doing it, but it's not a requirement. There are a number of people who are stepping into their life mission as avocation. They have a day job. They do that 40 hours a week. And then when they're not at that day job, they are doing their life mission. So, if you're not, let's say, if you haven't found a way to make your reason for being here, your passion, your calling, a job, it doesn't mean that you can't express it, so just to say that your life mission isn't necessarily a job, and with a little bit of creativity, staying in the conversation, being willing to be present to the guidance, I've yet to find somebody's life mission that couldn't be transitioned into a way to make a living doing it.
That's a big thing for a lot of people. And there's many different places we can go with that. And I'm coming from like the religious standpoint, man, where there's like a lot of people who there's a guilt there. Like there's a guilt with being successful. There's a guilt of making money, doing something that you love to do, or doing anything spiritual at that. There's a guilt that comes with it. There's this notion of Jesus and the prophets, and it's even in a lot of other religions, but they talk about the suffering servant. You have to do without, so that proves how spiritual you are, or your devotion of God, that you, or even like, the Gnostic understanding that you'll do without, so that, you could be more enlightened and things like that. So I'm seeing so many people and seeing them wrestle with it. And I've had to do it, because we see the abuse of it, we see all of that. And so people are trying to come out of that, of being okay to make a living doing something that's not a regular occupation that's 9 to 5, whether it's, I have friends who are spiritual healers, you know, they charge for sessions and stuff. They make a living doing what they love to do and doing what they feel like their life's mission is, you know. That's a big thing for a lot of people to get over. We're in a place now with the internet. It allows us to explore ways to actually make money doing what we love and presenting a service that didn't exist, or a service that people enjoy and they're willing to pay for. That's a big thing with people trying to walk in their life's goal, especially in like the spiritual community or like the religious community at that. Have you experienced anything like that, or dealt with clients who felt wrong because it was too easy? Like, it doesn't feel like work. Like, you know, work means you have to not like it. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of deal. You have to be stuck in the cage. So, you know, the English word work comes from the same word as allergy. We have a strange sort of relationship to this thing we call work. Like, career comes from the racetrack, dog racing track, which means to careen around the track. Work comes from the same root as allergy, or working against. And occupation is a military term. The only thing that resembles, let's say, something that our heart could connect to around this thing is, you know, possibly the word vocation and opus. Opus is a musical term that talks about a body of work over a lifetime with a sacred intent. So there's that. So it might be helpful to remember most of the patriarchs were wealthy men. You know, so it wasn't that money is evil, it's the love of money that is said to be evil. So being successful isn't a sin. You might ask yourself, what's it for, though? So it's, you know, are you in love with the money? Or, you know, my question in life is, I really don't have a thing about how much money. I just want to know that if Spirit says do this, I can do it. That thankfully I'm not in a place where I have to check my checkbook. It's like, okay, Spirit, I know you said you want me to do this thing, but let me check my checkbook and I'll get back to you. Right? Yeah. So my thing is, it doesn't really matter to me how much or how little, as long as when Spirit asks me to do something, I can just say yes. And it seems to work out that way. I get enough money to always be able to say yes. So, you know, maybe Bill Gates, who now is greatly involved in philanthropy, needed to make the billions he needed so that he can go to other places in the world and do the good things he's doing. That was between him and God. Yeah. Him and Spirit. So, you know, like the question of, is it wrong to be successful? Again, the patriarchs were wealthy men. You know, God didn't say to the patriarchs, you need to give away everything to do this. You know, maybe they were asked to be willing to, and sometimes Spirit asks you to be willing to give up everything. And if you say, yeah, I'm willing, often you don't have to. Yeah, exactly. Right? It's that test of the heart. Yeah. Yeah. So, no, it's not you know, even the word suffering means to go through or to move through. And the problem most people have is they suffer over their suffering. Suffering, you know, to go through means I'm not supposed to get stuck on this problem I'm having right now. And if I'm not suffering over my suffering, well, how can I use this to maybe not spend my whole life in the suffering place? You know, like, and I don't say that in a cavalier way because, you know, obviously there are people in this world who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in circumstances which, you know, when you say lift yourself up by your own bootstrap, well, they don't have a bootstrap to lift themselves up by. They do have a conversation with Spirit, though, and yeah. And so the question is, between them and Spirit, what does Spirit asking you to do with this? So I'm not cavalier about this. I'm just saying that it's not some crime to be successful. You know, and it's not, and the real question is, again, it always comes back to why. And what's it for? Why am I here? And if I'm going to be successful, and I think that if you're going to have consequence in the world, it's helpful, you know, to be masterful at what you're called to do so that you can have the influence you were meant to.
have. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think people have to get a new relationship with money, with income, with success, and I think it comes with what we've kind of been talking about, the whole self-sabotage thing. When money gets involved or they become successful, they get scared, they run when money's involved, and then it gets into what we also talked about, the opinions of men and other people's opinions of you making money or whatever the case is, and it gets into this weird circle of I don't know, just spinning your tires.
Yeah.
You know, and
well, that's a personal conversation for everyone.
Yeah.
Money is life force.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with it? And the only relevant question is, between myself and the one that sent me, only I can really know.
Yeah.
What's my why? What's my motive? What am I going? What's this in service to? And as long as I'm clear about my intention, people can say what they say, because people are going to always do that.
Yeah.
You know, the question is, are you clear about your intention? What's your why?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So, Daniel, I appreciate you coming on with me. If you want to plug some of your books, because everything that we've been talking about today, you've got a couple books that kind of map out practice on how to do this, how to stay mindful, and how to recapture that goal and things as well, or to remember the mission. Let's keep it in the key phrase, remembering the mission. Share your website and your books where everybody can check out your work.
So let's start with the Caravan of Remembering, roadmap for experiencing the awakening of your life's mission. That's available on Amazon. It's available on iTunes, on Kobo, all the e-formats. It's available on all the e-formats. You can order it from Amazon. You can order it through the Caravan of Remembering book site. There's a place called caravanconversations.community. The book Caravan of Remembering is what would be a weekend class embedded in a story, so that you have an example of somebody working the process for remembering your why, what, and who. So that on the Caravan community, or the Caravan conversations.community, is a place you can go to work the process in the book with other people from around the world. There are local groups, there are people who enter into conversations, let's say in a virtual conversation. So you could be anywhere in the world and join other people working the process. And there's also a Caravan of Remembering website on YouTube. There's the Caravan of Remembering website itself. There's the book site, and then let's say the enterprise that I bring a lot of this to the world with, including addressing some of those things that we self-sabotage ourselves with, through the organization that I co-founded called The Way of the Heart. So you could go to the wayoftheheart.com website and follow some of the things there, or you could go to the book site, or if you wanted to work with other people, caravanconversations.community. The book is The Caravan of Remembering. Any of the e-formats, you could go to Amazon to get the book.
Good stuff. Well, Daniel Goodenough, thank you for coming on and hanging out with me for this podcast. I enjoyed it so much. We'll have to do it again soon.
I love it. Thank you for having me on. It was great.
All right. You have a good one. God bless.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye. Daniel Goodenough, ladies and gentlemen. I like his last name, Goodenough. Why? Because you are good enough. Good stuff, man. I think that the two most important days in a person's life is the day that they were born and the day that they find out why they were born. Why are you here? Which is what we've been talking about. Finding out why you're here. Like I said, people are walking around aimlessly. They don't know why they're here. They're still looking for their life purpose. Even on into adulthood, man. People are just living by default, and that sucks. That's hell. That really is, of just existing and not having any purpose or any vision, man. The scripture says that where there is no vision, the people perish. That you have to have vision. And it's important to have something to work towards. And then it becomes about the journey, about how to actually get there, how to achieve those goals, how to find your bliss and create the life that you want for yourself. You get with God. You get with the Holy Spirit. You don't work against the Holy Spirit. You don't work against your divine will for your life. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're working against God. And I do think that we learn from our mistakes. I believe that if we go, down the wrong road, we have to be careful. But there's always something to learn. I don't think that it was for naught. I think that each path that we went down, even if the end goal is the only thing you get out of it is to not do that again, right? I'm telling you, man, like years ago, having a platform, my platform was a lot smaller, and for good reason. You know what I'm saying? It's for good reason. So I look at everything as preparation to get us where we're going. And I think I'm there. I'm in my life's mission. I'm having fun, encouraging people, inspiring people. But trust me, years ago, with having this much of a reach, I was not the most loving person. I was not the most spiritual person. I'm a regular person, right? It's not like all spirituality all the time, but you learn what to do and what not to do. You learn to treat others the way that you want to be treated, and to what you put out, it's going to come back. So I understand that karma, and I understand that you reap what you sow. And so that's why I want to put out good things into the earth. That's why I want to speak out blessings into the atmosphere, because I want it to come back sevenfold, greater, pressed down and shaken, stronger, man. And I believe that that's universal law, that whatever you plant, whatever you put out there, it's going to come back. Whatever you water, it's going to come back. It's going to grow. So whatever you're putting out, be conscious of it. And that, I think that's where it starts, of being conscious. He's talking about having that conversation with the one who sent you, having that inner dialogue with yourself. I mean, I've referenced this throughout my music for years, and even referencing the work of Michael Tessarian of having that inner dialogue with the self. Do you wake up and talk to yourself? You know what I'm saying? And all of the greats, all of the patriarchs, they all did that. Like, they all had that inward dialogue going on. So that's what it's about. Creating the life that you want for yourself. And I'm telling you, man, it's just like getting past the suffering servant, or God. It's a Gnostic belief. It really is, that God doesn't want you to enjoy life. God doesn't want you to prosper. Like all of these weird, what we would call ungodly beliefs that are hindering people and holding them back. Thinking that God is against them, or God is mad when they're happy, and God doesn't want them rich. All of these weird things. So I just want to let everybody know too, in the live stream, I disabled the super chat feature. Super chat's this YouTube button that allows people to donate just with the click of a button, and it would read in the live stream whatever you donated. But YouTube takes 30% of those donations. I just found out how much YouTube takes, and that's crazy. So I definitely didn't want to promote that. So if anybody who wants to give during the live stream and have your message read out, you can actually give via the link in the description too on the Streamlabs. So it'll read out your questions and comments and all of that kind of stuff. So feel free to do that if you would like. I had to get rid of super chat. Just they take way too much money. So I want to say yeah, Christy says 30%. What? Yeah, it's insane. So Patreon's good. The best way to give and to donate is through Patreon, but to have it read out in the streams, just click that link in the description to do it. It'll just pull up a quick pop-up, and it'll read out your message and all that cool stuff. So yeah, I want to say thank you for that. Anybody who wants to look at the stream schedule, I'm trying to go live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central. So that's what I'm trying to do. Some people's time zone doesn't really match up, and it's a lot earlier where they are, so I have to do some a little bit later, like this one today. So if you want to look at the stream schedule and some of the guests that I have lined up, just go to truthseeker.com and you can check it out there. I was able to get caught up on a bunch of podcasts here in the last week. People were sending donations so that we can get caught up on the server, so I can pay for the extra shows to get caught up. I'm still a couple episodes behind, but I'm trying to get those rolled out as well to be caught up. So eventually, probably put out the episodes the day after they air. I think that's going to be the best thing to do, or if not the same day. So I'm getting caught up. I've only got just a couple behind me, so that it's going to be caught up very soon, and I'll probably put one out tonight. And so that you're not listening to a podcast that aired a month ago on the podcast end, because I know that could be crazy. Especially we found that talking about the album release party and stuff like that. Hey, we got an album release party coming up Friday, and you listening to that on the podcast, and that Friday was 3 weeks ago. So that's what it's about. Just getting caught up so that everything that we're talking about is relevant. And so, yeah, I got pushed behind a little bit on the whole album release stuff coming up. That took up a lot of attention, so that's what that is. So, yeah, I got some awesome guests lined up here within the next couple weeks, and going to continue to go live on YouTube and bring out content, man. There's a bunch of stuff that we're doing. Like I said, consistency is key. At the end of the day, whatever we're bringing to the table, it's about being consistent and showing up. So bunch of shows lined up for I got like a month of shows planned already, so all that good stuff. If anybody would like to support what I'm doing, there's a donation link in the description. There's also patreon.com/truthseeker. That enables me to continue to do this and bring out some cool music, cool podcast, and do this stuff. So thank you guys so much for the support. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom, and thank you guys for hanging out with me. Peace, peace. I don't see my outro. I'm trying to find my outro, guys. Send you guys out with some music. Here's a song.
Your way so much higher than mine, so much higher than mine, so much deeper than mine, so much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the Truth Seeker podcast, head over to truthseeker.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/truthseeker.